So we're making progress. I have an engine on order. It actually shipped out today. I'm in Central California, an area called San Luis Obispo. The engine shipped out of an area called Long Beach, which is about a 4-hour drive south of me. Shipping freight, so my expectation is they'll be here in the next day or two. Now what I'm going to receive, this is a 2AZFE engine code, and this engine was used in a variety of cars. So it was used in a Scion XB, it was used in a Toyota Camry, it was used in the Toyota Highlander for a couple of years, it was used in the TC, it was used in the RAV4, variety of things. And they all have the same general nuts and bolts, but they have a couple differences. The sensors may be different, the plugs and wires may be different depending on the years, like meaning the plugs for all of the sensors, depending on the year of the car that it came out of. You know, it could be a variety of things that are slightly different. The engine will be compatible. So when you're buying engines, it's kind of, I don't know, there's kind of a question mark around what you're buying, I guess is probably the best way to describe it. So I purchased the engine from an eBay seller, JDM Motorsport. They're based out of Long Beach. I've purchased an engine from them before one time. The one other time I purchased an engine was for a TC, and it was the same exact engine. That worked very well. I installed it. I sold it 2 years ago. The girl is actually a coworker's daughter, bought it from me, and she still drives it today and has had no issues with it. The engine that I got was very clean. The problem is that you don't end up with a like a mileage verification or a odometer statement or anything like that. So you just have to assume that the engine has a certain amount of usage. Now I will say that it was way cleaner than this was. Way cleaner than this is. And, you know, I see pictures on eBay of the actual item that I purchased. So, you know, it looks like I'm going to get something similar. I spent like $1,608 shipped for the engine. So it's like $1,500 plus tax with shipping included. And that includes freight, residential delivery with a lift gate. So last time they, you know, brought a truck here with a lift gate. They dropped it on the ground, they used a pallet jack to get it to the top of my driveway, and they left me a pallet sitting in my driveway. The engine weighs about 250 pounds by itself, the long block. Sometimes there are accessories bolted to it, sensors bolted to it, things like that. Sometimes there aren't. So what I'm going to run into is, depending on what engine the donor, or what donor car the engine came out of, certain things are going to be slightly different. Like the alternator might be different. The hookups for the radiator intake tubes and exhaust tubes, you know, the plugs on some of the sensors may be different. The sensors may be different themselves. The threading on the engine will be the same, but the physical sensor may be different. One other thing that tends to be different is the engine mount on this side of the engine. So, you know, this engine mounts in 4 places. There's a front mount here, there's a side mount here, there's usually a mount on the transmission, and then there's usually one in the rear. So in this case, this mount on this side is going to have to be swapped, which means that the timing chain cover also needs to be swapped, because it actually mounts the timing chain and the bolt holes are in a different spot. So I'm going to actually have to swap the timing chain cover, most likely, to the new one. Now, I do have to change the timing chain and change the tensioner in order to have a warranty on the new engine. And I would probably do that anyway, because I bought a new timing chain kit for this engine that I ended up installing and never actually using for anything. So I have a brand new timing chain and timing chain tensioner that's sitting right there. So I'm going to install it. I need to remove the oil pan in order to remove the timing chain pan. So I'm going to have to redo those gaskets and seals. I'm going to have to redo the timing belt cover, or timing chain cover gasket, the valve cover gasket. I have a set of brand new plugs from this that I purchased for this that have never run, so those will go in the new engine as well. I'm also going to need to order what they call an upper gasket kit. And really I only need a couple gaskets. but the upper gasket kit tends to be a lot less expensive than the sum of its parts. And if you're missing like one gasket, that can halt your entire putting the car back together. So it's going to include like the exhaust gasket and the intake gasket, and the valve cover gasket, which I already have, and gaskets for like the sensors and different things around the car. And it comes in a kit. So they sell an upper kit and a lower kit. I'm going to get an upper kit for it. So what I'm doing here in preparation for getting the engine is starting to take this thing apart. And really, there are kind of two ways to take an engine out of a car. You can unbolt everything from the top and you can drop it out of the bottom, which is how a mechanic would do it when they have a lift. They have a lift and they have an engine hoist, and the engine hoist would cradle the engine and drop it out of the bottom of the car. So there's a subframe that gets removed and the engine comes down on top of that. I don't have the luxury of the lift. I might be able to jack this up on the floor jacks enough to maybe scoot an engine out from underneath it. I just can't be bothered. So in my case, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be removing a lot of the accessories and things from the engine inside the car so that I end up with just a long block and a transmission attached to it. And I should be able to lift that out of the car through the hood. If I can't sneak it out through the hood, which I'm like 99% sure I'm going to be able to. I was able to in the TC, but this is a little bit smaller car. It's a little bit tighter. What I do have the ability to do is remove the front clip, meaning the front bumper and the radiator that's behind it, and this upper beam that goes across is bolted in. So I can theoretically have like a big horseshoe here that's just, turn the camera down a little bit. I could theoretically have a big horseshoe here that goes all the way across, you know, with a bunch of space that I can pull the engine forward. So that's, you know, that's kind of the extent of where I'm at right now. So I started off, you know, I removed the exhaust manifold in order to find my actual leak in the first place. So that's already out of the car. Next, I'm going to start removing. I removed the engine mount on this side of the car when I did the water pump, and I just never reinstalled it. The serpentine belt is off already. So I removed the battery today, and I'm going to remove this battery tray, the black metal tray that's at the bottom there, just get that out of there. And then the very next thing that I'll take out is the intake. So on this shelf, and here's actually the battery tray, the plastic tray that was sitting on top of it. So there's the battery tray. Here's my exhaust headers. Here are all the bolts to mount the exhaust headers. So these are the nuts to secure it to the engine. These are the bolts that secure this heat shield. These are the bolts that connect it to the next piece in line. These are the two bolts that mount it to the side of the engine. Here's my engine mount. Here's the bolts to attach the engine mount to the engine and to the vehicle. There's my wheel with my lug nuts. Very simple. So laying them out like this kind of does two things. One, it makes sure that all of the hardware and stuff ends up together. And then two, it also kind of gives you an order of operations. So I started filling that shelf from the left side, went all the way over to the right. I'm going to try to clear out the second shelf on that rack and just start going left to right on the second shelf, and then I'll start doing some stuff on the floor. I don't know how much I'll actually need to do on the floor, but when I'm putting everything back together, I'll just go right to left across the shelf, right to left across the bottom shelf, and kind of put things back in the order that I took them out. And that way I won't end. So a good example would be if I remove the ECM, well, you need to get out the airbox to put the ECM in. Well, if I put the airbox back first, I might not be able to mount the ECM and get that back into its place. So, yeah, so just slowly, methodically going through everything, putting everything over there. I did order the engine, it is on its way, and I did pick up some more fluids. I got another 5 quarts of 520, but really, in playing with the engine the first time, I wasted a bunch of my time, which sucks, but I only really wasted 5 quarts of oil. That's the only thing that I can't recover from my initial investigation, is the 5 quarts of oil that I physically installed in the engine, because you know, I'm not going to take that out, drain it, and then put it in another engine. It just doesn't make sense. It's $17 for 5 quarts of oil. Everything else, though, the timing chain I would have had to get anyway. The plugs I would have had to get anyway. So, you know, there isn't a lot of waste of money at this point. So that's it. I'm going to keep taking some stuff apart. I'll check back in on the video, probably when I get the airbox out, kind of show you where I'm at, and try to keep you up to date without this video being reasonably, this is probably going to be 12 to 14 hours worth of work. And I can't post a 14-hour YouTube video. It just doesn't make sense. So I probably already have a couple hours of video that I've taken. So thanks for watching. Thanks for viewing the update. And my hope is, you know, I picked this thing up on Saturday. It's Wednesday. My goal is 2 weeks from the day that I bought it. So, you know, today is day 4. So my goal is by day 14 to have this thing running. And I think that's reasonable. I think it's doable. But, you know, the other thing is that I bought this car to flip it, and I'm in the state of California, and the state of California requires a smog certificate on a vehicle that's purchased. Well, I can't smog the car because it doesn't run. And the DMV doesn't understand that. So I submitted all of the paperwork. I put that the engine doesn't run and that the car can't be smogged, and I asked for a planned non-operation certificate, which basically states that the car is not going to be driven, and I'm just asking for a transfer of title. And they sent me a message asking me for a smog, and I responded that I can't smog it, and they asked me it's an automated system that asked me for a smog. So you know, my goal is to get this thing running, and then once I get it running, I'm going to take it to have it smogged. And then once I get it smogged, I can fill out the paperwork, and I can actually just take away the P&O requirement and just say I want to transfer this. And then the DMV is going to take somewhere between 30 and 60 days to release a title to me. So from the point where I bought this to the point where I actually have the paperwork to sell it is going to be somewhere between 6 and 10 weeks. That's kind of what I'm looking at. So this is going to have to be added to my insurance. It's going to have to be something that I'm, you know, floating for a certain length of time, and just dealing with the fact that it's costing me money to sit in my garage. And I will add that it's a little stressful for me, and take this how you will, but I take pride in keeping my cars very clean, and they're both outside right now, and they're both a mess right now because I can't park them in my garage. We have a lot of wind here. There's a racetrack down the street that's a dirt track that generates a lot of dust. There's a lot of dust in the mountains and farms around us. So, you know, even when I clean a car, if I leave it outside overnight, it's covered with dust the next morning by the time the dew settles and the wind blows and all of that stuff. So it's stressing me out to have them dirty. All right, so here's the airbox removed, battery tray removed. So we're looking at the transmission with the transmission mount or engine mount. It's kind of a combination. So I think this is going to be it for tonight. Tomorrow I'm going to work on the alternator, which is here, the AC compressor, which is down here. Remove this this intake, or whatever, it's coolant connection. So I'll remove this coolant connection. And this one as well, and just try to pull the rest of that stuff out of here. And then yeah, so once that's done, we'll pick the engine up with the engine hoist, and we'll pull it forward as far as we can, and then we'll try to get the intake and stuff off the back of it while it's in the car. So moving along, but I think this is going to be it for tonight. It's getting pretty late. Alright, so here's kind of where we're at. I've removed the accessories from the front of the engine. I have disconnected the wiring harness from the fuse box and computer, and just kind of bundled it all up on top of the engine here. I have the engine hooked to the engine hoist. I'm using ratchet straps, which isn't the best idea, but they'll work for what we're trying to do. These are rated at 1,200 pounds, and this is, you know, a 250-pound engine. So I did remove this engine mount over here, the one that's on the transmission. The one on the left has been removed for a while. This one is now loosened up, so just need to take the bolts out of it. And then that just leaves the back and the axles. So just going to try to lift up some of the pressure off of the engine, kind of get it hanging from this mount a little bit, and then remove this front mount and see what I can do to get the axles out.